Physical resources strictly limit the expansion of any empire. When gold and silver veins run dry, the state inevitably turns to the printing press. We are going to track the specific macroeconomic mechanisms that cause fiat currencies to collapse, taking the empires that issue them down with them. This sequence of events did not begin in modern Europe. It started 6 centuries earlier, under the Song and Yuan Dynasties in China. By the 11th century, the Song economy supported a population of 100 million people, driving a highly complex, commercialized market. To maintain that scale of trade, the Song required a monetary tool that Adam Smith later called a wagonway through the air: paper money. Paper credit provided immense logistical flexibility, but it introduced a new mechanical variable. It allowed the state to decouple its spending from the actual productivity of the private sector. While fiat currency can build the initial infrastructure of an empire, the insulation it provides to bureaucrats often leads to a hyperinflationary cycle once spending exceeds the economy's capacity to support it. The physical limitation of the early Song economy was the currency itself. Trade relied heavily on low-value, highly viscous iron and bronze coins. For merchants, this presented a hard mathematical limit. Large-scale, long-distance trade was impossible because the physical weight of the iron required to make a purchase often exceeded the value of the goods themselves. This crisis was most severe in the isolated, mountainous province of Sichuan. Geography made transporting millions of metal coins physically unworkable. The private market engineered a solution. Merchants in the late Tang and early Song periods created deposit shops to issue flying cash, or fei qin. These evolved into jiaozi, regional promissory notes that acted as easily transportable trade receipts. Mechanically, these early notes were not fiat money. They were strictly redeemable claims on physical metal reserves held in private vaults. Making a piece of paper trusted over physical metal in a medieval economy required immense security against forgery. The imperial state quickly recognized the immense leverage this system provided. They intervened, outlawed private deposit shops, and established a government monopoly over the issuance of jiaozi. For the first time in history, commercial trade transitioned from exchanging intrinsic metallic value to trading the state's promise of value. The Song state needed this leverage because it faced a severe macroeconomic crisis. Massive, heavily armed nomadic confederations, the Liao and Jin dynasties, threatened the northern borders. The internal cost of defense was staggering. By 1041, the Song maintained a standing army of 1.25 million men, consuming nearly 80% of the imperial budget. To maintain border peace, the Song were also forced into extortionate treaty obligations, paying massive annual tributes to their rivals. The Chanyuan and Longxing treaties required hundreds of thousands of bolts of silk and ounces of silver to leave the treasury every year. These fixed tribute costs, layered on extreme military bloat, generated an insurmountable structural deficit. Facing insolvency, Emperor Shenzong and his premier, Wang Anshi, initiated a radical economic overhaul to save the imperial budget. In 1069, Wang launched the Xinfa, or new policies. The imperial state abandoned its role as a passive tax collector and became an active, aggressive market manipulator. The Green Sprouts Law bypassed local rural users, allowing the government to issue direct loans to farmers at interest, creating a massive new revenue stream. The Market Exchange Law and Balanced Delivery Law were deployed to dictate urban commodity pricing and monopolize key commercial sectors. The mercantilist logic was straightforward: extract maximum wealth from large landowners and redirect it directly into the military machine. Wang Anshi's policies permanently entangled the state's survival with aggressive financial engineering. To fund this level of intervention, the temptation of the printing press became irresistible. To finance Wang's massive interventions and the permanent war economy, the government required vastly more capital than the agrarian economy could provide through taxation. They bridged this gap through seigniorage, the immense profit a government extracts when it issues currency for a face value much higher than its cost of printing. Seigniorage functions as a hidden, unlegislated tax. The state prints money to pay its bills, continuously diluting the purchasing power of the populace. Because they no longer relied strictly on tax revenue, bureaucrats were insulated from the immediate economic damage of their interventions. Burdensome policies survived because the printing press masked the deficits. The system fractured when the state attempted to dictate economic value purely by decree, forcing newly printed paper notes and existing copper coins to share the exact same mandated face value. This dynamic triggers Gresham's law, the economic principle stating that bad money drives out good. Citizens recognized that paper was intrinsically worthless, while copper held real value. Consequently, the public aggressively hoarded the precious copper coins, or smuggled them to overseas markets, where their metal value was respected. As the copper vanished from circulation, the domestic economy was flooded with increasingly devalued, artificially mandated paper notes. By attempting to dictate economic value purely by decree, the state hollowed out its own hard currency reserves, leaving the empire financially brittle. The terminal shock to this financially brittle economy arrived with the Mongol conquest, culminating in 1276. Kublai Khan implemented a monetary policy designed to unify the diverse economies of his conquered territories. He created the Zongtong Yunbaochao, the world's first fiat money backed strictly by a silver standard. This chart of historical Yuan dynasty data tracks commodity prices against the volume of printed currency. Between 1260 and 1276, strict convertibility to silver bullion kept prices stable, but the chart reveals a major inflection point where issuance volume spikes, breaking the silver peg. This data spike correlates precisely with severe internal civil wars. The state printed massive volumes of money to buy the loyalty of rival Mongol princes and fund military campaigns. The breaking point arrived when the silver treasury finally ran dry. Rather than cut spending, the Yuan dynasty simply continued printing, transitioning to a pure, unbacked fiat currency. Returning to the historical data, we can track the mathematical aftermath of abandoning the silver standard. Basic commodity prices suffered tenfold and eventually 20-fold increases. The state had triggered total, uncontrollable hyperinflation. The Yuan data shows a specific pattern. When fiat issuance is used to patch structural deficits, the resulting expansion in money supply directly correlates to the destruction of purchasing power. In late Yuan China, hyperinflation reduced the state's official legal tender to literal scrap paper. The most commercially advanced empire on Earth suffered severe economic regression, forced to revert to primitive barter and uncoined lumps of silver for basic trade. The political fallout of this wealth destruction was absolute. The productive classes were utterly alienated, and they actively facilitated the collapse and expulsion of the Yuan dynasty. The subsequent Ming dynasty, led by its peasant-born founder Zhu Yuanzhang, reacted to the devastation. Zhu harbored a deep ideological hostility toward the complex market mechanisms and financial engineering that had caused such societal ruin. As a result, the Ming dynasty effectively abandoned sovereign paper money, permanently stunting China's financial evolution for centuries. The history of the sovereign print demonstrates the volatility of state-managed credit. While paper money possesses the power to build the infrastructure of an empire, substituting ink for real economic productivity remains a lethal poison that inevitably destroys the state from within.